All right, back of another power rankings. We're getting down to it, right? We only have three of these left essentially this season because week 15 is mostly in the books. Still some Monday night games, which is why you see a few teams on the board. Those are teams that play Monday night, so I just put them on the board already. But yeah, let's get into the rest of the league. Let's just jump into it. Starting as we do every week with the Titans. I don't know how they got billed as the team we start off with every week. Not a good game by the Titans. Will Levis, it's probably ending his time in Tennessee. He did have some flashes this season, but ultimately too many games like this. Put in Mason Rudolph, didn't get much better. I mean they're a bottom tier team right now. They're in the Mac Jones Jaguars tier. The Dolphins, who, I was singing their praises. I was saying Tua's looked great since coming back from his injury. Like, this offense is rolling. They had a bit of a rough spot against the Packers, but it's a cold weather game, all that stuff. Now that they're getting, they're fully playing at their best. They look great, but it's just the playing good teams thing is a real thing at this point. It just is. Like, it's another situation where the Texans defense, which is very good and has made other quarterbacks look bad. And I'm not saying that I think the Dolphins are a bad team or that like they're garbage. Listen, they still have an outside chance at the playoffs, although it's going to be really tough now. They've had a much better chance had they won. I don't know. I'm gonna drop them a tier. They were in solid last week. I'm dropping them to scrappy. I think that feels fair. Hey, the Jets, who I feel like have looked better these past couple of weeks. I mean, it helps when Devontae Adams is going for 200 yards. So I don't know. I'm willing to bump them up. I can't quite bump them up to scrappy. They're still the Jets. They still find ways to lose, but we're able to win here. So give them some credit. Beating a admittedly team that was at one point so bad I created their own tier, the Mac Jones Jaguars tier. So not the most impressive victory, but a victory is a victory. So I'll give them credit for that. They, did look better. If they are going to run this back next year, then maybe some reason for optimism if you're a Jets fan, which is not something you usually have reason for. The Bengals, who I put them in a scrappy tier. This just feels fair. Again, offense wasn't quite as dominant as we've seen in other games. They still put up a ton of points. Could have put up 7 more had their defender, who nearly had a defensive touchdown, get the ball over the goal line there. That happened to a couple teams in this game. So, yeah, I mean, still some really good stuff with this team. I think their defense isn't good enough. Probably isn't going to get in, but, that's where I have them. The Browns, who I had been keeping in scrappy, I think I got to drop them down to bad, which is unfair because, we know Jameis Winston is probably going to go off next week against the Bengals defense, right? We know that's going to happen. So that could be actually a really fun game, the Bengals-Browns. But, again, this is the downside. And this is the thing where when we all talk about Jameis Winston and, could you actually consider making him a starter? This is why you can't really make him a starter if you're trying to be a Super Bowl caliber team. Like the Russell Wilson thing with the Steelers, right? Teams are like, okay, I don't know if we can make him a starter if we're paying him a ton of money, but what if we pay him a little bit? Okay, now we can be a real contender, perhaps. I don't know if Winston is that. I just don't. The Jaguars, who they're in an interesting situation because I created the Mac Jones Jaguars tier, but I feel like they haven't really been a bottom team caliber team lately, right? So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to change the bottom tier. It is now week 11 Mac Jones Jaguars. That is the tier. And then I'll bump the Jaguars, who are now not in week 11, up to just the bad tier. Because, yeah, they've looked better these past 3 games, really. They lost to the Jets, but I thought they looked all right in this game. Jones had that horrible interception at the end, but it did look better. They beat the Titans. They, played the Texans very tough. So, okay, I'll give them some credit here. Let's go to the Lions, who their injuries are starting to mount up. The offense is still really good, and Jared Goff I thought was awesome in this game. So, I'm still willing to put them in the Super Bowl contenders tier, but, I mean, there was a point this season when I put them in a tier of their own above every other team because I thought they were looking that good. That's not the situation now because I think the injuries prior to this week were a factor, but survivable. Now I'm not so sure, and that's scary. The 1 seed is very much up for grabs. I mean, it's very possible that the Lions could lose one more game, and that's enough to mean that they don't get the 1 seed. So, yeah, that being said, again, this offense is awesome. And, it's the Bills. The Bills offense can do this to teams as well. That has to be factored in. The Buccaneers, who I've been kind of hesitant on bumping them all the way up to feels like playoffs, just because during their 3-game, this is the 4-game win streak now. During the first 3 games, they beat up on bad teams. I wasn't, I didn't want to overreact to it, but now they beat up on a really good team. The Chargers, who we'll talk about, entered this week in the feels like playoffs tier. The Buccaneers, again, 40 points against the top scoring defense in the league, and number 1 in points per drive as well, the Chargers defense, and the Buccaneers put up 40. I mean, this was an awesome game, and the return of the Todd Bowles defense. I blame Todd Bowles a lot on this channel, but I've always maintained he's a good defensive coach, and one thing you see about him is that it's such a complex scheme that they run that it might just take some time for these guys, even if it's a lot of players who, have played with together before. There always is turnover. It might just take some time for them to fully figure out how to do this, and maybe they've got it. They're also just healthier now. That's a big factor. But, really good win, and Herbert was banged up. That has to be mentioned as well. We'll get into the Chargers when we talk about the Chargers. The 49ers, who are, a team that, okay, they lost against the Rams. It was kind of this rainy game. I don't know how much to take away from that. I've had them in the solid tier. I think that still feels fair. I still think I'll keep them in the solid tier. I don't know. They're fine. They're a fine team right now. Obviously, the injuries hurt them too much. But, again, weird game. Purdy still can't make that interception there at the end, right? There are still some issues. But yeah, I'm not taking too much away from that game. They were solid last week. I'm going to keep them here. The Ravens, who dominated the Giants, I've kept them in the feels like playoffs tier because they've lost too many games. I think if they win next week, I'll bump them back up to dark horse. They're playing the Steelers, so that should be interesting. But I'm not promising, but I think probably I will bump them up with a win next week. Again, Giants are horrible. You played Tim Boyle. You don't get that much credit, but they did do what they were supposed to do and blow out the Giants. The Dallas Cowboys all of a sudden are looking a little better, right? I mean, I just don't know how much to make of this team, but Micah Parsons is very good. CeeDee Lamb is very good. Those guys are, showing their value. I'll bump them up to Scrappy. Cooper Rush looked all right. He still makes a lot of mistakes too, but yeah, Scrappy feels fair. They're playing better football as of right now. So maybe it's a bit hot putting them into the Scrappy tier, but they're at least above the bottom teams. I feel like they're better than some of the other bottom teams as of right now. The Texans are a team that I think I felt good about this week. I did feel good about their win. I mean, the sky was kind of falling in Houston. I had them in a solid tier prior to this, and the sky was falling. They, are they going to even make the playoffs? Now they've clinched the division with still 3 games to go. They are definitely in the playoffs and feel like a playoff team. I'm going to put them in that tier, bump them up a little bit because this defense is really good. And who knows, maybe in the AFC and just in the league in general, feels like offenses rule the league. Maybe having a good defense could be something. Offensive line will have to block better when they get there, though, if they're going to have a real chance. That's just how I see it. The stupid Indianapolis Colts, what happened there? What was that game? I mean, the Colts, who really could have beaten the Denver Broncos. I mean, the Broncos, we'll get into them when we get into them, but the Broncos did not play their best football at all. They made a ton of mistakes, but the Colts just made even stupider ones, with Jonathan Taylor dropping the ball at the goal line when they had a chance to go up 2 scores, and it would have been 2 touchdowns that could have gone up. Instead, he drops it at the goal line. They're only up 6. Denver ultimately takes the lead, and then when the Colts are down 4 in the fourth quarter, they try this ridiculous trick play, where it ends up getting intercepted in return for a touchdown, and that essentially cost them the game. It wasn't a horrible down in and down out performance, but the mistakes were just so brutal. Here's what I'm going to do. I've created the stupid tier, and that's the Colts. The Colts have to be in the stupid tier for at least a week because that's what they deserve for this performance. So they are in the stupid tier as of right now. The Los Angeles Rams are next on this list, who, again, I don't know how much to take away from that rain game, but like there is something to be said about finding a way to win and, having good coaching and good play calling and understanding this is a unique game. Let's find a way to win. What I like about football is that the weather is a factor, and sometimes things get weird, and it's not always just simply about, who has the best quarterback, although I think they did have the best quarterback as well. I thought Stafford, despite the bad numbers, made some real plays in a game that he was never going to look great in due to the conditions. I think this is a playoff team. I feel like they feel like a playoff team, so that's where I'm putting them. The Chargers, who I think earlier this year I had in the dark horse tier. I had dropped them to feels like playoffs, and I think I have to drop them again to the solid tier. Herbert's banged up, and that's a real factor. This team can't really win one-on-ones. I mean, you saw Tampa Bay play man coverage a lot and just be able to win consistently. The Chargers had a couple. Ladd McConkey had a couple wins, but that was really it for them. Their other wins came against zone when Tampa Bay tried that early on in the game. It was a tough offensive showing, and their defense, I think you've always kind of wondered, okay, this defense is so well coached, but what happens when you play a Mike Evans, who's just like a great player who can just, beat really whoever you throw out there. Now, they had some injuries defensively as well. They lost the starting corner. That hurts, right? But still, I feel a little worse about the Chargers now. I just do. The record isn't as good as it was earlier. I still think this is a good team. I still think they get into the playoffs, but they're not playing great right now. The Commanders, who I like how it's still the Washington football team logo on there. It always cracks me up. But the Commanders are a team that, I'm conflicted on where I want to put them between feels like playoffs and solid. Because I think the Commanders are Jaden Daniels, I thought, was really good in this game. Some of the throws he made to Terry McLaurin were fantastic. I still think he is easily the bright spot of this team. They just made too many mistakes in the second half, too many penalties, at bad times, sacks at bad times. It was an issue there. It just was, and that's not something they have to fix. They nearly lost to a team in the Saints that I don't think is very good. Do I want to drop them down a tier? I think I kind of have to right now. I just don't feel like they're playing their best football right now. They play the Eagles. Hey, easily can get bumped up a tier if they can pull off that upset. They don't even have to win that game. In fact, if they lose that game and then they beat the Falcons, that's all they need. They could even lose to the Cowboys the final game of the season. They would get in. They just need to beat Atlanta. But yeah, I think they get into the playoffs, but I don't think they're playing their best football at the right time. The Kansas City Chiefs, so this is interesting. I think I'm assuming Mahomes is going to be 100% at some point in the near future. It might not be next week. I'm assuming by playoffs, he will be 100%. So I'm just going to factor in Mahomes is 100%. Let's just talk about them there, in which case they are obviously Super Bowl contenders. Now, if he isn't, that does drop them down. For all the people that say that Mahomes is just a passenger on this team is just silly. Mahomes does so much. I know his numbers aren't great, but he does so much for this team. So many little things when they don't have the best talent around him, still finding ways to make things work. If Carson Wentz plays, I don't know if it's going to go well for the Kansas City Chiefs. I just don't. So that injury is a huge issue, but as long as they can win a couple games and Mahomes can get 100%, they're the one seed. They're the Chiefs. They're obviously contenders. Next up, let's go to the Saints, who we just touched on. Hey, they looked better with Spencer Rattler out there. I don't know. I still don't think this is a great team. I'm going to put them in the bad tier. Again, I think some of the ways they were able to get stops in the second half was, they were able to make plays, but also I thought that the Commanders, had some self-inflicted wounds there as well. Got to give credit to the Saints for forcing them, of course. And Spencer Rattler's interesting. I want to see him the next 3 games because he's shown flashes, right? He hasn't been super consistent, but what rookie really is super consistent? So I don't know. I find him interesting enough. I'm more fascinated in him than Jake Haener. Certainly, that was, Kyle and I kind of joked on the podcast of, they had this mid-season quarterback controversy. You'd think this late into the season, who your number 2 quarterback is. Haener won that job and immediately lost it. Weird thing there. Next up, the Giants, who, It's just so bad, right? I mean, they're in the Week 11 Mac Jones Jaguars tier list. I could probably just call them the Tim Boyle Giants tier. Is that what I should do? I think that's what I should do. Yeah, let's make it Tim Boyle Giants, because I mean it's just tough, right? I mean, for one thing, Tim Boyle, Kyle and I have it's been a running joke on the podcast. If you look up his college stats, they're shockingly bad, let alone his NFL ones. I mean, give credit to him. He's found a way to make a living off of playing football, which is good for him. But just in general, I mean, it's an awful team. Like, even with the quarterback, like Daniel Jones, who I think is a perfectly fine backup quarterback. They couldn't do anything then, so certainly can't do anything with the Tim Boyle Giants level of play. So yeah, they're in a deep rebuild. It is what it is. They should get a good draft pick. The Eagles continue to impress, right? Really destroying the Pittsburgh Steelers here. Destroying is maybe too harsh, but a dominant win, a convincing win against the Pittsburgh Steelers. The running game wasn't able to get going, but hey, the passing game was. Jalen Hurts, kind of after last week when everyone was talking about what went wrong, well, now we got to talk about what went right. I mean, he was great. A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith were great. Just a really awesome passing attack. And then this Eagles defense continues to be one of the best defenses in the league. So yeah, really good stuff there. And the flip side is the Steelers, who I think it's fair to say no George Pickens. Okay, that matters. Like, yes, you could argue, should you be one player dependent that much? Maybe not. But still, that is a factor. It does just feel like they kind of, if they can't hit on their explosive plays, can they go on a run? I don't know. It feels like they need to hit on these explosives, and they weren't able to in this game. Again, Pickens is the part of that. He hasn't been all of that, though, this season. Other guys have hit on explosives, not in this game. I'll keep them in dark horse for now. They are in danger of dropping down a tier. I think if the Ravens win, I could see me flipping those two teams. But again, we'll see if it does happen, how it happens, all that stuff. The Broncos, who... This was a bad game by the Broncos. This was not a good game from their perspective. They didn't make the plays they had to make. Again, give credit to them. They held on to the ball every time they went into the end zone. And I thought that their best plays were the best plays. Bo Nix has kind of been a little shaky these past couple of weeks. He needs to get back to playing before that season, Bo Nix. But I still feel okay about this team. I'm going to keep them in feels like playoffs. I could see myself dropping them a tier as well. I think they're closer to a tier below than a tier above, but I've been kind of a little lower on the Broncos all season than most people are, so I might just be, might have some weird hang up for whatever reason. I don't know, but I don't think I don't think I do, but maybe. I don't know. The Packers continue to look impressive here. A dominant win against Seattle. They're at least dark horse. I think dark horse feels fair. You could maybe even talk me into Super Bowl contenders with how well they looked last week. Now, I won't quite do that. The offense definitely went cold in the second half. There's no denying that. It was also red hot in the first half with Josh Jacobs and all that stuff that was happening. So that really helped. And this Packers defense is real. It's a really good defense. So factor all that in. Yeah, they're a real contender. They really are. The Panthers, oh man, I was so on the Panthers hype train. I was driving the Panthers hype train. I put them all the way up into solid tier last week, and then they, it did not go well. And listen, Bryce Young isn't going to become a quarterback where he never has bad games. He has looked better since coming back from the benching. You knew he was going to have some bad games eventually. It was not his best game, and even the stats look a little better due to a 70-yard completion on a blown coverage. Scrappy feels fair. I'm going to drop them down a tier. You could talk me into dropping them down to bad if you want to, but I don't know. The offense has looked good enough in key games that I'm willing to keep them here for now, at least. The Cardinals, who, listen, are very much still alive here. I'm going to put them in the solid tier. The Cardinals are a team that on their best days look awesome, and if they go 3-0, they would need a little bit of help, but they actually wouldn't need a ton of help. In fact, the way I did my playoff predictions thing, and the way I'm predicting every game to go, that would mean that the Cardinals get in if they go 3-0. Have to do that, though. They play the Rams in a couple weeks, so got to make sure that they take care of business. But, it's interesting where they're at right now. the Bills, who are absolutely Super Bowl contenders. I mean, you look at the 4 teams in the Super Bowl contending tier, they've played 2 of them and won both those games. They've beaten the Lions, they've beaten the Chiefs, have not played the Eagles, but they're the 4th team. So like that's impressive what they've done. That resume is very impressive. Now, it's a little concerning that it feels like they have to score 40 points to win games. They need to start worrying about getting defensive stops. They need to try and get healthier or figure something else out because that's an issue. But at the same time, because again, all these teams have injuries. Bills definitely have their defensive injuries. But yeah, that's where they're at right now. The Seahawks, this is a tough loss. I mean, I had kept them in feels like playoffs. I have to drop them down a tier because I mean, not only do you lose the game, what's the health of Geno Smith? And like, okay, this was a scheduled loss. We thought Seattle was going to lose to Green Bay. It wasn't competitive, and that's the concerning thing as well. The Seahawks could absolutely still make the playoffs. In fact, it'll probably come down to that final game of the season, but like, it was a tough loss. There's no getting around it. This was not what you want to see from Seattle. They have had a bit of variance this season. Catch them on their best day, they look great. Catch them on their worst day, they don't. So we'll see if they can bounce back. But they need Geno Smith healthy down the stretch if they're going to have a real chance, I think. Patriots are bad. I don't know. I don't know why I'm holding out hope, keeping them in this tier. They're Tim Boyle Giants bad. It's not good. Drake May, very fun. I think Kyle brought up that they had, like, Drake May was like 10 for 10 in the first half, and they had just 3 points, which is hilarious. It's one of those, how does that even happen stats. Yeah, they're a bad team. They're not very well coached. There's just, not a lot going on here. So that's where they're at. So yeah, that's my tier list. Let me know in the comments below. What do you agree with? What do you disagree with? Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.